Okay, good morning all. My name's Alan Plasek, Workforce Services Coordinator at DFSS, and welcome to all, including our new agencies. We're very excited to have you on board. It was also great seeing everyone at the roundtable meetings earlier this week, including our returning delegate agencies as well as our new partners. So we're excited to have you all on board. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Juan Cruz. Juan.
Good morning, all. Thank you for joining us. We hope that you have a good experience, and we hope to answer a lot of your questions regarding our new structure.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, and also during the course of the presentation, we'll be joined by Deputy Commissioner Joel Mitchell. So he will join us when he is available to come in. And we also do have our technical advisor with us, Tom Moe. So if there's any technical issues, we hope to be able to handle that as well. And once again, there is a link on the right side panel that says Workforce Services 2019 webinar slides. If you want to click on that and print those slides out and follow along during the presentation, make some notes in the margins, please do so now. Thank you. Okay, you see the agenda in front of you, and we're going to get started. We're going to try to address all of these items here on the agenda. Some of them will be brief, and some of them you may be familiar with already, and some of them will definitely require a little further clarification and further discussion. So as you can see, we're going to talk about the DFSS strategic framework. We'll definitely talk about changes to workforce performance payments. Matter of fact, that's the main bullet point of this webinar. So I know you're all anxious to find out how you can get paid. And then as far as number 3, negotiation guidelines, reimbursement rates, we will also discuss that. But that'll also be an area that Juan and I can discuss with you on a one-to-one basis as we move forward. And then, of course, the new budget form, which we'll get into, and that will be the performance budget form. So we'll discuss that in more detail. And then Juan will focus on discussing the work plan and the programmatic monitoring review and ECM. So let's move on to our first key slide, which briefly is just talking about how this all came about. How did we develop these new payment points and why? And as you can see on the left, there's phase 1, which is setting the priorities and outcome goals. So we discussed those aspects internally with our team here. Phase 2, which was November 2017 to currently December 2018, we engaged delegates to improve services and outcomes in line with phase 1 goals. So there's a couple bullet points right there in that box on the right where it says conduct more robust planning for RFPs, and then the next one, develop RFPs and contracts focused on outcome goals. I want to point out that these 2 bullet points, that's why there was a major emphasis on proposals and proposal scores for this current round of awards. And then, of course, the final bullet point, actively manage contracts to drive continuous improvement. So this isn't just you enroll a person, you place them, and you get paid. It's much, much more than that. Okay, so we're going to talk about, those performance payments that we are now implementing in 2019. So the key phrase right here is the Workforce Division's priorities are sustained employment and income growth for participants. Sustained employment. I know that means different things to different people, but in the past, you all know, well, most of you should know that we were paying at the 30-day placement benchmark. Well, we'll be discussing how you're going to get paid for the 90-day retention benchmark, as well as a career path for that individual in employment. So as we talked about in our strategic framework, 75% of participants will obtain jobs, out of which 90% will receive a base hourly pay greater than or equal to the standard city minimum wage. Everybody's been hearing about the standard city minimum wage. We're pushing for that, and we want everybody to get a fair wage and salary. And then, of course, 80% will retain jobs for 90 days. So these are some benchmarks that we are hoping to achieve. On the next slide, Juan and I call this like a one-pager. This briefly summarizes our workforce division and the program models that our key program models. Hopefully everybody listening in will fall into one of those program models: employment prep and placement, industry specific, and transitional jobs. So you can see this is a summary of the majority of the work that we do. And as you can see, the box that says job readiness training, case management, other services, that flows through all of our program models. And we're certainly hoping that everybody is doing a JRT component of your program. And as you can see, industry specific is pretty self-explanatory. That specific training in some of the key industries, high sought after jobs. And then, of course, transitional jobs, an excellent program. It's where subsidized jobs, there's a portion of your award that goes directly to subsidized jobs and the wages that those individuals get. And then, of course, job placement, very key, and then retention. We'll certainly talk about the retention aspect. Oh, I just want to point out that this webinar is being recorded for future viewing. There may be some of your colleagues who are not able to attend. Maybe they have another commitment today, or they've started their holiday vacation. So this will definitely be available for later view, and we will make sure that we get those particular links to you. Also, I should mention that we would be very pleased if you have questions as we go along. You can type those in the fields on the right panel. Once again, Juan and I will try to address those as we go along. If there is something that we need to discuss a little bit further, we can get an answer to you at the conclusion or at a later time. But feel free to, jot down any questions you might have that may need further clarification or further discussion. So this slide basically tells where other funding goes here at DFSS with regard to our Workforce Services Division oversight. As you can see, the bulk of our funding is under the CDBG category. And if any of you are wondering, well, why did we get switched from CSBG funding to CDBG funding? Well, we wanted to be consistent with all of our TJ programs. So the majority of our transitional jobs programs are now funded by CSBG. So if you were formerly CSBG and now you find yourself under CDBG funding, that's okay. It's nothing bad. It's just we wanted to be consistent across the board. And then you could just see a couple of the other funding categories, also Title 20 and corporate. So we do have a lot of different areas that we fund here in our workforce area. Okay, moving on to slide number 8. If everybody is at slide number 8, this is a summary, once again, of some of the performance numbers over the past year. As you can see, the bulk of our activity is under employment prep and placement, but we do have a breakdown as far as the other program models and contract size and the amount of agencies and contracts and the funding that goes with each program model. And we just have like a footnote that explains some of the agencies that are listening in right now. They have 2, and in some cases 3 contracts for different program models. So that's just a little footnote to indicate where the money is being allocated. Okay, moving to the next slide, wanted to mention that we solicited feedback on the way we had been currently doing things. 2018 is the second year of the 2-year cycle, and previously, in previous years, things were the same year after year, and we wanted to find something new and exciting and different, challenging and cutting edge. So this slide tells us that we try to determine through our delegate agencies and focus groups, what is it that you need? What is it that would make your job easier? What would make it better? And Chicago Jobs Council was instrumental in pulling this together for us. So that's why some of the things that are implemented in 2019 is based on some of these surveys and focus groups. So once again, thank you to CJC and to all of those delegate agencies that participated in those focus groups. Okay, so on our next slide, we're up to slide number 10 right now. We develop a payment structure to achieve 2 goals based on these focus groups. And as you can see, number 1, we want to help Chicagoans from priority populations. We'll be hearing that term an awful lot the next year and as well as today. So priority populations to obtain and retain employment. And number 2, provide delegates with sufficient resources upfront. Let me emphasize, upfront, to do enhanced case management, believe necessary to achieve this success. So that's going to be a key factor in as we move forward. We're going to discuss that a little bit further shortly. I do want to say that on the next slide, there were a couple best practices that our team, and when I say our team, we had the group from the Harvard Law Group had helped us. We had additional team members here at DFSS, and we had like internal focus groups to discuss best practices and how to improve the payment structure. As you can see after the first bullet point, placement, retention, priority population, wages, that's nothing new. These metrics are something that you're all familiar with, but now payment will be tied to them. And then the 2, I guess, agencies, best practices that we looked into a little bit further. One was from the City of San Francisco, their Office of Economic and Workforce Development, and then the other one was Rhode Island Department of Human Services. So we thank those folks for their best practices and input. Okay, we have a question that we'd like to address right now. Will we be paid for the 90-day retention rather than the 30-day placement from now on? Juan can answer that question for you.
Yeah, we're going to get more into that later in the slide when we get to our actual budget forms. But quickly, 30-day retention is still the same. So 30-day retention, you will get reimbursed for 30 days. However, 90-day retention also has a reimbursement or billable payment point to it as well, and it's that third of that contract, that 1.5 of that. But we'll discuss that later. But 30-day retention is one of the staples, enrollments and placements. So 30-day retention is still here. So we're going to discuss that later. But thank you, Ashley, for your question.
Okay, fantastic. So on slide 12, we are going to get right into it right now as far as what are the changes? What are we implementing? And as you can see from this slide, we have the current configuration, which our current delegate agencies are very familiar with. So the enrollment, we paid you for 30 to 40% of your contract, depending on the program model. That was under enrollment. And then the 30-day retention, as Juan just discussed, that was a bigger chunk of your award, 60 to 70%. So the next line where we say implement 2019, we are flipping it. So as I mentioned just a little bit ago, we are now paying more upfront. So as you can see, we're shifting the weight of the existing structure to provide you with more financial resources upfront, because we know you do an awful lot of work to prepare that individual to move forward during his or her career path. So, and then you can see so there's 62% will be paid upfront for enrollment, 35% will be paid towards the next category, 30-day retention, and then you will see there's two more payment points, which we'll discuss shortly. 1.5%, which is the priority population, and those will be tied to your enrollments, and 1.5% of your contract for 90-day retention. So if you look at those percentages, 62 plus 35 plus 1.5 plus 1.5, that equals 100%. So that's how you will be paid this year on your when you voucher. Okay, so we are going to move on to the discussion of the first change. So as I just said, we're shifting the weight of existing payments to provide delegates with resources up front. So that's the 62% box. So the goal is to provide you with more resources on the front end as you go through the cycle of preparing that individual, for success in the program. We all realize that success means different things to different people, but we also realize that this preparation phase takes much longer than originally thought. So that's the first change in this new shift. Okay, let's move on to the second change. Here we go. The second change, as you can see, we are introducing performance payments focused on priority populations and retention. So there's that important phrase again, priority populations. Who are they? Well, you told us that you reach out to the most vulnerable people in your communities, and those priority populations were mentioned in the scope of service. They were mentioned in the RFP. They were mentioned by you folks in your proposals, and that consists of returning citizens or ex-offenders. It consists of those folks that are homeless or at risk of homelessness, and it consists of those individuals that have limited English proficiency. Those are the bullet points for priority populations. And you can determine that when you are enrolling somebody, which category do they fall under. And then the final payment point would be 90-day retention. So that is pretty self-explanatory, 90-day retention. So once an employed person meets their first benchmark of 30 days, we are very hopeful and optimistic that you will track that individual and let us know when they hit the 90-day mark that you can voucher us and be paid for that next payment point. And we're going to clarify some of this as we move along, but this slide here is just a summary of roughly what this will mean to your budget. So 3% of the overall budget is tied to these two new performance payments. So we won't go over this in any great deal. This is just a summary. So as you can see, across all three of our programs, 3% of the $5 million budget, $5.2 million budget is $150,000. So that's the metrics that goes with this particular new structure. Okay, changes that are designed to benefit participants, delegates, and DFSS. So the participants, the benefits are we're focusing on the priority populations with the highest barriers to success in employment. We're increasing support through enhanced case management, and now we're focusing on longer-term employment retention, 90 days. So that will be the benefits for participants. Delegates, what do you realize as far as benefits? Well, this aligns with delegates when you spend time with the candidates. and the barriers faced by these priority populations. So it's not just something that you enroll them and you move them along through JRT and boom, they get a job. It's much more involved, and we certainly realize that, and we want to reward you for your time and effort. And then also provides access to a larger proportion of the funds at the earlier point, enabling delegates to do more enhanced case management believed necessary to achieve success. And then here at DFSS, it reinforces key strategies that we have talked about in our strategic framework, the priority population and long-term retention. These are key goals that we want to address. And then let's go to another question that is timely right now. So the question is, exactly what will qualify to show proof of special population? Excellent question. Very excellent question. Juan, you want to address that? We're going to get to that momentarily, but.
So hello, everyone. This is Joel Mitchell, and just joining you all now. Wanted to make sure I was a part of this presentation. Great question, and actually a few slides further into the deck, we will show and be able to give you a couple of examples of what we will deem as necessary for proof. And so many of you all are familiar with having a homeless verification form, or you may also have documentation from a returning citizen. Maybe they have probation records or parole records. Or then for those who speak English as a second language, maybe they've been to an ESL class or something like that. But the thing we want to reinforce is that we don't want to make this a huge barrier for you all to be able to demonstrate that. And so we have examples of this documentation, but at the end of the day, if you're having challenges getting or obtaining that documentation, we will also have samples of self-client verification forms. And so therefore, when you sit with the resident and you have your case manager speaking with them, we will also allow you to do a self-certification document as well. So again, we don't want this to be a barrier for you, but we do want to have information that's going to be housed in the client files to demonstrate proof of the client meeting these the target population requirements or eligibility.
So Joel hit the nail right on the head there. So if you see, as we move further on, he referenced some samples. That'll be slide 25, 26, and 27. So there are samples. So this is not an official form that we here at DFSS created. It is something that, as Joel described, you can provide us with support documentation when you voucher us for that particular category. Okay. Want to talk about expenditures when projecting expenditures for 27 outcomes under the current and new payment structure. Here is a side-by-side comparison. Okay, 40% of delegates we anticipate would earn more funds in this new structure. What this means is we don't want to leave any money on the table, and that has happened previously. So if we collectively combine all the money that is left unspent, that's a pretty sizable number, and it certainly does not look good to our funder, HUD. So we certainly want to reduce that number as much as we can. And we do have another question that we can jump into right now. Let's see. Is this the one about a limited English question? Okay, so this goes back to a previous slide. For limited English category, can TABE test results be used as proof? TABE usually tests their proficiency, I believe, in English and math. So with the English portion, I believe if there are TABE results, yes, that should be sufficient. So the answer to that question is yes. And let's see, for the target population, what language will self-verification forms be translated into?
So for that question, basically it's your agency, and so you know the different populations that you work with. And so if you work with someone that that falls outside of the three major translations that we generally see, which is Spanish or Polish or even Mandarin or something like that, your agency will have the opportunity to create a form and have it translated for whatever languages and dialects that you come in contact with. Again, we don't want to be so prescriptive here at DFSS, and so you will have the ability to take a sample that we're giving you and then be able to draft it based on what your need will be.
Okay, and just one little bullet point after what Joel said. The individual who has limited English proficiency, they do not have to go to City College. They don't have to go to an outside educational institution. If you have an internal remediation literacy program, ESL type of program, that's great. That's fantastic. Some sort of documentation, as Joel was talking about, would be sufficient. Okay, now we have a question regarding contracts. Is there an opportunity to ever increase our contracted amount?
So no, this is Joel again. Basically, this is Joel, Deputy Commissioner with the Department of Family and Support Services. So basically, when we set our budgets for the year, that is a budget that is created with the Department of Family and Support Services and the Office of Budget Management and the Mayor's Office. And so the budgets are generally set for the 12-month period. If there are ever opportunities, sometimes, as many of you know, sometimes the budget office may see salvage in other parts of the city, and then we have an opportunity to share that information. But basically, our 12-month budget is set, and we will not experience any increases during the 12-month period. If that should happen to change, we will definitely let you all know as soon as possible.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. We just want to finish up with slide number 17. 60% of delegates we anticipate would earn a similar level of funds because you continue to do the great work that you do and you meet your annual performance goals. And in most cases, you have met your goals and have spent the entire amount of your award. So once again, as Joel was talking about funding, if you receive level funding in the next new year, we certainly anticipate that you will hit the mark once again.
And one other point that I would like to make, and I'm sure Alan and Juan have made it, is that we say 60% of you will continue to earn a similar level because we understand that many of you are already doing this work. We understand that many of you are already working with the target populations that we have identified. After reviewing your RFPs, many of you have talked about working with homeless individuals, returning citizens, people for whom with English is their second language. So we know that you're already doing this work. However, by moving to these new payment points, it's going to give us an opportunity to now be able to track that information. And so we are giving you an opportunity to now get recognized for the great work that you're already doing. And so that's how we're going to be able to begin to track this information, because when we receive questions from the mayor's office about our programs and our services, we did not previously have data points to, I guess, validate the work that we were doing in some of these instances. And so now as a system, as a division within our department, we will be able to better document and demonstrate the work that we are doing with these target populations.
Okay, Joel was just talking about responding to the questions about a contract award amount. Year after year, we get questions about agencies that meet and surpass or meet their goals early in the program year. Is there an opportunity for an increase during the course of the year?
So as you all know, the city is really very similar to you all. And so that means we are over 85% of the funding that we receive is grant funded. So our department, we do not receive a lot of corporate funding. And so therefore, it's on a prescription. It's a formula-based amount that we receive as a department. And so although your agency is able to do an excellent job and get ahead of, the performance measures that we've laid out, our department still only has a limited amount of funding that we can allocate to these programs. And so that's the long answer. I wish we did have more funding that we could pass around, or not just pass around, but that we could allocate to organizations. Unfortunately, we have very limited and structured resources that we have to offer these programs. So unfortunately, the answer to that would be no.
Okay, thank you, Joel. We're going to jump to slide number 18, but there's not too much that we want to add to this. We've already addressed this particular slide. We talked about this slide 3. So this is more or less the same thing as slide 3, but here we're now going to focus on what we're all here for today, which is the payment structure. So we're going to get right into improving the performance payment structure right now. And you've been hearing about this for the past several slides. So on slide 19, here is the information about what are we implementing right now. And as you can see in the opening paragraph, while submitting vouchers, we plugged in there the 15th of each month. Our internal review person is Cheryl Perkins. Many of you worked with her predecessor, Carla Willis. Carla has retired, and we wish her well, and she's doing great. But Cheryl Perkins is your contact person, and we'll make sure that everybody gets her contact information. But she reviews all the vouchers internally for us before it is moved up to the next area. And then just a brief message. Of course, if you're an existing agency, you are registered in the e-procurement system, and you have been vouchering previously. And even new folks, you had to register in order to submit a proposal. But here's the main link for e-procurement. So all vouchering will be done through the iSupplier portal under e-procurement. Okay, do we have any question or? Okay, we do have a question that we want to respond to. How
was the budget amount that was awarded calculated for those existing participating agencies? What were the basis for the award, performance, meaning quotas, et cetera? What may have caused decreases? And so, great question. Basically, all of those items that you listed went into the calculation. Our department received level funding this year, and so therefore, when we went to do our calculations for the upcoming year, factors that went into play were agencies' performance, agencies' RFP score, if agencies left money on the table, and then also being able to, as the city's leading funder for workforce programming, then we also wanted to ensure that we were able to provide funding across the city. And so basically the main factors, again, were our P score, past performance, if money was left on the table, and then just our department's overall amount of funding. Given the current drug epidemic in the city of Chicago, will substance use disorders individuals be included in the priority population? I think that's a great question. However, that will not be taken into consideration for 2019. After we get through 2019, as we're focusing on returning citizens, as we're focusing on the homeless population and English as a second language, we will review the data that we see, and then if we get more information about substance abuse, because again, there is a department through the Chicago Department of Public Health that provides those services to residents. I don't know yet if that will raise for us to become one of our targets. However, let's go through the course of this year, and then after we review the data, we will see if we need to make any revisions.
All right, fantastic. We have a question regarding the forms for the new payment structure, and we will get into that very, very shortly. As a matter of fact, Juan did plug in the forms on this presentation, and in a couple slides, the answer to that question is yes, we do have the forms, and we're going to discuss that. Will there be a list of the funded agencies? Oh, of course, sure. Every year we update our delegate agency list regarding the agencies. We certainly promote collaboration amongst the group, and there's a lot of change turnover within the delegate agencies. So we try to update that list frequently. So yes, we'll make sure that everybody gets a list of the currently funded agencies for 2019.
And then if someone meant, was there a list of the other agencies? You know, the city has a transparent process. You will always see on the city's website, I don't have that website in front of me, but you'll see all of the delegate agencies that we work with. Question to number 3, for the payment points, must they take ESL classes, and what are the supporting docs required? So again, we're going to get to some samples of that supporting documentation. We are not requiring that residents take English as a second language, but again, now that we have changed our process, and now that we will be funding agencies and providing a little more support up front, if you have case managers that are working with these individuals and you know that they have English as a second language as a challenge, there will be certification forms that we will provide samples of self-certification forms that your agency can use. Again, we don't want this to come across as being yet another barrier or another challenge for residents to get the support that they need. And so we're flexible, we're willing to work with you, and so therefore, if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to us and we'll work with you as it relates to any of these target populations and documentation that's required.
Okay, folks, just want to point out a lot of your questions that are coming in are excellent questions. If you can hold off for just a few moments on some of these questions, because we're going to cover it. You're asking all the questions that are in the presentation, so we will cover that momentarily. So just hold off on the forms, on the process, on the percentages. We're going to get to that right now. So let's move right along. So thank you very much. Slide 19. Here are the 4 payment points that we've been talking about. Enrollments, obviously, that hasn't changed. Placements, 30-day employment verification, that hasn't changed. Number 3, target POP. We've already talked about that. You also see a 75% of total enrollments should fall under the category of target POP or priority population. And then 90-day retention, 40%. You should shoot for 40% of your 30-day placements to reach the 90-day retention. So these are goals that we would like you to meet, and we certainly hope that you will be able to do that, and we know you will. So we're going to talk about various formulas to compile to spend down your money on your contract. So now, as far as the method of payment, we have a sample illustration of how this is going to work. We've also included this illustration or sample in your scope of services document. I believe it was page 5. So this should not be new to you, but this example is based on a $100,000 total award. So this is just a sample, just an example of how to use the formula to allocate the different amounts of money for your contract.
Yeah, and I'd like to add, too, this is a great illustration of how it should look on your budget form. On your new budget form, those are actually the lines that's going to be on there. It's going to be enrollment, placement, the target population, and then 90-day retention. So this is really good how you can kind of set up when you see the new budget form with the 4 account lines, it's going to go straight across as this. So this is a really good depiction of what is to come with the budget form.
Excellent. And that's perfect, Juan, because we will get to that in slide 23 momentarily. So Keep this slide handy in your notes, because when you complete Form 3 for the performance budget, there will be the column that says description. What are you billing us for? How many placements? How many enrollments? So you will use some of this language in column, let's see, it's column 6. So that's the description and justification column. So we'll get to that in a couple slides. Okay, Juan, do you want to talk about the work program, the work plan? By the way, those names are interchangeable, folks. Work program, work plan. Juan's going to talk about some of the activities. Well, actually, it's pretty self-explanatory right there as far as what we would like all agencies to be doing as far as activities for the course of the year.
Yeah, so the work program is going to be your contract with us. So with the programmatic team here, even with our monitors, they are going to monitor you off, and we're going to grade you off of your performance on a quarterly basis. And so definitely keep your work program handy, and you should be working off your work program at all times. So when programmatic monitoring comes out, they're going to be looking for this. How many did you plan to enroll, or the activities that you plan to do, your planned deliverables? You're going to put that in as far as quarterly, and it's going to tally up at the end. And so at all times, you should be working off your work program. And so for most of the agencies, you're going to have recruitment, enrollment, training, placements, 30-day retention, 90-day, and 180-day. All aside from the transitional jobs. The transitional jobs will have another line in there as far as an activity, which will be subsidized job enrollments and subsidized and unsubsidized placement. So they just have an extra line in there. But again, your work program is your contract with us, and so you should be working off this at all times.
Fantastic. And when you came in for the roundtable meetings with Juan and myself, most of you turned this in, but there were a couple things that needed to be either changed or corrected or amended. So there's plenty of time to get that into us. We'd like you to get that in as quickly as possible, and then ready to start work in January 1 for the new year. Okay, any questions about that? We will address them later, but we want to get right into the budget forms, which starts on page 22 or slide 22. Let me just also say that the next two slides, Form 1 and Form 3, this comprises your performance budget summary. When you came in for your roundtable on Monday, we apologize. This form was not available on the city's website for you to click on and do your work on. It is there now. It is at the cityofchicago.org/FSS contracts link. So when you enter that link, it'll take you to the page that most of you are familiar with when you clicked on scope of services, budget. This particular document is there, and it is called 2019 Budget CDBG Delegates Only. Let me say that one more time. This is the performance budget for these new payment points we're talking about, and the document is called 2019 Budget CDBG Delegates Only. Okay, so you also see this is current. It has the approving person's name on the lower right. That is A. Smith. That is Angela Smith, Angie Smith. So all budgets need to have Angie Smith's name on it, and she is the department person that will sign off on this. This line was previously taken up by Walter Brown. Once again, Walter, a well-deserving retirement. So many of you have worked with Walter in the past several years. So this is the official budget form. So I want to jump over to form number 3. This is the one that Juan had talked about with the 4 categories, and you can see in column 2 it has an account number 1241 for enrollment. So there are 4 separate lines right now. In the old days, there was only one line, and you put your enrollments and placements on that one line. I believe it was the 0140 line. That's gone. No more. This is the new budget for CDBG for the new performance payment points. So just take a few moments to see that we have talked about enrollments, placements. Nothing has changed there. Now we have the priority population, target population on activity 1243. And if you jump over to column 6, you'll see that's where you put the description and the justification. So that's your narrative, and that's a description of what you are billing us for or budgeting for that particular category. And then the fourth one is 90-day placement retention. That's the activity code 1244. So hopefully this is crystal clear, and you'll be able to work with this, and Juan and I will discuss it with you if there's any questions or confusion as far as adding up the total amounts. Sometimes there are rounding issues when you enter an amount and it rounds for you, so be aware of that. Once Juan and I initial off on this, it goes to our finance team, and many of you have worked with Anthony Bruce before. He's the next person along the line, so your fiscal person will be hearing from Anthony if there are any questions. Just wanna make a note of the serving priority populations role, and yeah, let's start with that one. In some of our descriptions, the scope of services, we talked about a $500 payment of $500 increments. What this basically means is we are not going to pay under $500, so you have to package your submittal at $500 or more. So let's say you are submitting your voucher for enrollment, so 10 enrollments. Okay, obviously that's going to be more than $500. But now when you are doing the priority population category, pool your target population folks or package that so that when you submit that on your voucher, your request for reimbursement, it will be $500 or more. Hopefully that's the same thing with the 90-day category. Collect the participants that hit the 90-day mark, where it will be $500 or more. So those will be the increments. Now, also, the examples we gave you were based on a $100,000 illustration. Not everybody's going to get a $100,000 award. Some more, some less. So keep those percentages and that formula in mind when you are putting your numbers together, because you might not get a total of $500 at one of these categories. So if there are any questions about that, we will certainly address them. But as I said, Juan and I will be discussing your budget at a further, well, as time moves on, because we want to get all of that information approved and moved up to the next approving department. Okay. You want to go to number 22?
No. So just another note on the non-personnel for subsidized stipends. Okay. That's the fifth line for those transitional jobs program model recipients. So if you have a transitional job, this is the area where you would put your work wage amount in that box. And again, the benefit of having these separate lines is to allow the agencies to track their payments and the amount of expenditures more accurately. Again, it was combined under the professional and technical line. Now you can just voucher off those separate lines. You can have a better account of just your expenditure. And then speaking of expenditures, for those that's current in 2018, we will be sending out an email to you about your year-end expenditures. You should be at about 85% expenditure rate. Please make sure that you are submitting your vouchers. This is our year-end. It's wrapping up. Again, to current delegate agencies, you need to be at or above 85% expenditure rate. Just wanted to note those two.
Excellent. Very good. Tom, could you go back half a second to, okay, one more point about the serving priority population and 90-day placement retention rows. E-procurement will track. They will keep track of what you submit. So I know you all keep good records on your end, but they will track, e-procurement will track where you are as far as how much you have spent already. So that you'll be able to see that on e-procurement when you go into your create invoice section.
So if someone has a question, excuse me, can you explain the vouchering process again when adding the 500? So basically, as Juan and Alan has mentioned, as you're doing your vouchers for enrollments and placements, that process will remain the same. However, we know that some of you may have the idea of submitting a voucher or separate vouchers for the target placements or the target populations or even the 90-day placement. Basically, what we're saying is when you submit your voucher, we are asking that you do not submit vouchers for $100, for example, because it costs our administrative team $100 just to cash a check. And so basically what Martin and Alan, what they're saying is, as you are pulling together your target population and your 90-day enrollment, just whatever that figure is, if it's less than 100, just fold it into your regular voucher amount. We just did not want you all to send in separate vouchers for $100 or $200. If it comes to that amount, just go ahead and fold it into your regular voucher for your placement.
Excellent. Very good. We're checking on the question right now that just came in.
So
that's just an example. When we say you're saying the new payments are bunched by $500, but if the total is less than $500, do I assume correctly that we can submit our final amount, even though it may be less? So exactly, this is what we're saying. We're using $500 as an example based on a $100,000 grant. We understand that the math may not be that clean for you all, and so we're saying that if you do have an amount or a voucher less than $500, we're just asking that you include that or fold it into an amount that's higher. And so therefore, you may need to continue to track this so that this is not the last voucher that you submit. So you may not be able to wait to the very end to submit that voucher. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, we're gonna move into the voucher transmittal form, but I just want to say once again, thank you for all the questions that you're asking. They're all spot on, and we're hoping to answer them as best we can as we move along. But we're going to answer them at the end of at the end of this event. Okay, voucher transmittal form. Current delegate agencies should be familiar with this. This was required to include with your support documents when vouchering. And it is slightly changed from how it used to be. So this is new to everybody, current agencies or existing delegate agencies as well as new agencies. I will point out that we're going to revise this form one more time to make it even more clear. But as you can see, if you are submitting a voucher for enrollments, we want you to check off the enrollment box and then put how many people are on this list. And then obviously you put their name and social and enrollment date. If they fall under a category of one of the target populations, we would like you to check that box. But now we're going to be revising this because we're going to give you a code to indicate which one of those categories that person falls under. So if John Doe is being enrolled and John is a returning citizen, you're going to check off the box that says returning citizen, or you'll put the code that says maybe RC. So we are going to revise this a little. So you won't even see all those boxes for social. We'll request just the final 4 digits of their social. And once again, a reminder to the existing folks, and this is for the new folks, we would like you to submit a separate voucher transmittal for enrollments and a separate one for placements. So do not combine enrollments and placements on the same transmittal. Hope that's clear. And then you can see the box that indicates under for placements, which one are you vouchering for? Is it a 30-day or a 90-day? So hang in there for a little bit. We're going to touch this form up again, but this is a required document that Cheryl Perkins will be looking for when she sees your submittal through e-procurement. Anything else?
Yeah, just a quick note. We had a question saying about the 180 days. We will put that 180 days just to reflect the work plan. So it was a little oversight. Thanks for that. Again, this is new, and but thanks for that feedback. So 180 days will be there.
And to clarify, because I did see someone ask the question, will there be an incentive for 180 days? We still want to track the 180 days, but right now we are not tying a payment to it. And so therefore, it will not be incentivized. It will not be a payment for 180 days, but we still would like for you to track that as you continue to go forward.
Great, thank you. Before we move from this form, I just want to, we are not covering it in this particular session, but Juan and I will cover it shortly, but that's the additional support documents. Existing agencies, and I'm sure you're very familiar with the support documents required for vouchering, which would be enrollment forms, placement forms, and now the 90-day retention form, and an employer verification. So we're not going to address that right now in this presentation, but for the new folks, yes, there is support documentation that you will be required to submit along with your voucher request through e-procurement. So we will get to that in the coming weeks. We are in the process of updating our manual, the 2019 manual, and all those forms will be in there. So the new folks, hang in there. We're going to get all of those forms for you so that you know what to submit. So thank you for your patience on this form. We're now going to put the transmittal form on the side. And once again, if you have questions about the document submittal, Cheryl Perkins is excellent. She gets through the vouchers in a timely manner. If there's an issue or something is missing or miscalculated, she'll get back to you on that. And she's excellent on the phone as well as through emails. So get to know Cheryl very well. Okay, as Joel talked about earlier, the support documents for some of our target populations. So it looks like page 25, 26, and 27 are all samples. These are samples that some of our agencies have been kind enough to share with us, and they all look great. As we previously stated, you can create an internal form if you want for somebody who's going through like an ESL type of class internally, unless it's an official document, an enrollment form, admissions form from wherever, Truman College or Harold Washington or some other training provider. So the next 3 pages are samples of what we would like to see.
So just one moment. And so basically with these forms, and so just so that you know, after you have identified a person as meeting the target population, Juan and Alan, they're going to be reviewing what documentation should be submitted with your voucher. However, this documentation in terms of the eligibility docs and the verification form, we are not requesting that you submit all of this information. This is information that needs to be maintained in your client file. And so therefore, we're going to go through what should all be submitted, but then also what should be maintained in the client record. And so again, this is an example. The next 3 slides that you see, these sample forms, this is documentation that you will need to maintain in the client file. And so therefore, as you all know, we have a programmatic monitoring team. And so they will be reviewing your vouchers, and they will also be reviewing your supporting documentation that is in the file. And so if you said that you work with a returning citizen, this is a part of your target population. This is the eligibility, or this is the documentation that we will need to see in your file. So I wanted to make sure that you understand it. So this form should be in your file, and the next two that we go over, all of these forms that demonstrate that this person is indeed a member of that target population, this information should be kept in your file and should be ready to be presented when our programmatic auditors come out for their monitoring reviews.
Excellent. Excellent. Like I said, slide 25, 26, and 27 are samples. The slide 26 is if somebody is in an ESL class or taking some sort of language remediation program, and as one of the questions earlier about TABE testing, I think TABE results would indicate that's a good a document that we could also see. And then the self-attestation or self-declaration of housing status. This is a sample of a form that you can certainly use. You know, if there's some sample forms that you see that you would like us to share with you, we could do that too. But as I said, you can certainly create something that will indicate which category that person falls under.
And this question states, we have clients that bring in copies of their background. Do we still need to fill out the form? And so in this instance, if they're bringing in that documentation, you will not need to create a separate form. We're just saying for those agencies that may not have one or may not understand what it looks like, these are samples. If you have a client that brings in and submits their documentation, that's okay. We will approve that. But again, we just need some documentation in the form.
Excellent.
I'm sorry, in the file.
Okay. Okay, great. When Joel mentioned about monitoring and what should be in a client's file, that's an excellent segue to this next section, which is regarding our programmatic monitoring unit and audits. Please don't be afraid of that word audit. We do have a programmatic monitoring team that many of you have met over the course of the years. So Juan is going to discuss some of the things that the monitors are looking for when they come out to your site, as well as the monitors will provide technical assistance in some of the areas that you are a little bit unsure of or not positive that you need to have this when they come out to see you. So Juan, I'll pass it over the baton over to you for this section.
So everyone, as you know, we do have a programmatic monitoring team, and they come out basically on a regular basis. And so these are just samples and actually real life examples of what the monitoring team looks for. They will review your agency to ensure that you have your information regarding, this is Joel Mitchell, Family and Support Services, not Juan. But basically what you see in front of you, you'll see that this is information that our programmatic monitoring team looks for when they come to your organization. They're going to look for your board's bylaws. They're going to look for the last 2 board meeting minutes, board membership listing, board chairman's contact information. They're going to look for your personnel records. And so I don't have to read all of these to you. This information will be made available to you. We're going to drop a link for you to be able to access it. We may also email a copy of the deck out to you. But again, we want you to know that this is the framework that our monitoring division uses when they come out to monitor your organization. And so what we also want to do probably within the first quarter of 2019 for our first delegate agency quarter meeting, we have requested that the monitoring team, that they come out and that they do a presentation for all of our agencies. And the other thing that we're going to get to at some point, and I know that Alan mentioned about having forms, the budget, our finance division has new forms. We want to make sure that we're going to have a location where you can go and pull down all new forms. So this won't be an issue for our new agencies. However, we have had some agencies that have been around for years, and we come out with forms, and one of the challenges that our programmatic auditors have is that some agencies may still have old Xerox copies of forms that was used, 5-10 years ago. So we want to make sure that this year, going forward in 2019, each agency has access to the new, most current, updated forms. And again, this is an example that you will have available for your review. Again, this just continues as it relates to the programmatic piece. They're going to look for your scope of services, proof of employment, and tracking of job retention. So all of that is in there, and this is the information that will need to be in your files when they come out to conduct a site visit.
Yeah, hi, this is Juan Cruz. We're going to move on to the reporting aspect, but just to mention on the, just to go back to, just to talk about the monitoring, the last piece of that really is just on the programmatic side for Alan and myself, is that in the past we've seen some findings that came up that can be easily remedied, and that is with just reporting over what the estimated number of planned outcomes you have, right? So for the performance-based agencies, under CDBG, all of it is performance-based, we're saying don't go over what the planned numbers are, because then if you do and you can't verify that, then that's inaccurate reporting. That's a grounds for a finding. You have to submit a corrective action plan. And again, these are just items that went overlooked, and we have seen a recurrence of this a lot. And so just moving forward, just only report on the documentations that you can verify, right? So when they come out there, we just want to have a smooth transition with that process. We're going to send you out whatever the reporting, the monitoring tools are, so you know the areas where they will be looking at. And Joe mentioned some of those. But again, just on the reporting on the programmatic side, whatever you plan to do and are contracted to do, just only report on that, because we're not paying for the other services. And then what's reported is what's get monitored. So if you don't have evidence of it, please don't submit it. Okay, so moving.
There's a question about two means of egress. That means in and out. Are there two exits and entrances for your property, your facility?
All right, so the reporting. So again, ECM, I hope everybody for 2018 have had great luck and experience and found the new version 6 more user-friendly. We've done our best to have trainings, there's webinars on it. You have video tutorials with it. We had a push to have all of our data for 2018 dumped in there. So for the 2018 agencies, we're still looking at that. And if anybody's having any technical difficulties, please reach out to me with login credentials if needed. But we need all of that information dumped in there, and so we can have a good run on kind of going away and moving away from our Excel spreadsheets. We're not going to move away from that until we can get a good analysis and a comparison that both are reporting are accurately. So we don't want you to have multiple reporting tools, but definitely for the first month or so, just to get a good gauge. But for the current delegates, that deadline is approaching. We've asked for a survey. We sent out a survey to you. If you haven't already done so, the survey will be closing next week. You can tell us what you like about it, what you don't like about it. but your feedback is needed. You guys are boots on the ground. You can give us way more than what we planned to create when we were creating this. So if you're running into any problems, please share that. It's anonymous, but just share your feedback on the process of what you like, what you don't like, what you're having problems with. Again, if you need login credentials, I can give you that right away. So just send me an email and we can get that.
And, no, I'm sorry. And for the new agencies that are just coming on board, we will follow up with you to see how we can get you trained on ECM and get you your login credentials. And so as soon as the new year comes, we will make sure that we get you scheduled for training and get you access to ECM. So to Juan's point, we're rolling ECM out. And as you all have been using it in 2018, in 2019, after we've ensured that everyone has been trained and everyone has their login credentials, ECM will be the single point of contact for submitting your documentation and running reports. And so I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows if you are a new agency, we will make sure that, yes, so I see the question, if you're a new agency or if you have new staff, we will try to get you in as soon as possible for training so that you can also have the credentials. Thank you.
Yeah, so all right. Yeah, the next slide. Yeah, so again, this is just a slide. The first slide was the enrollment piece. The second one, so it's only two areas. It's the enrollment, and if you can just go back. So the enrollment for the ECM, you just have this pane, this window, which have the different tabs on it. And so this is going to run from intake to create an application all the way to case notes. And the case notes is going to be your 5 days of service. And so after you've done that, you'll be able to lock that and move to the placement aspect of it, which is really the person is eligible, being eligible, met all the eligibility criteria. And then the next portion of this is just workforce. This is WF placement. So on the WF placement, which is the next slide, you have the goal, which is the program model that you're going into, and then entering in the work history, education. This will allow a person to create a resume at the end. It's optional, but the bulk of it is individual employment plans. Just creating those employment plans and then tracking the progress with your progress notes of just reaching those activities or tasks to get the person to the point where they obtain the goal that they created with you. So you have your services that you did and then a resume. And so that completes that portion of the ECM. Again, identifying target populations is key inside of ECM. So we have areas in there where you can identify the target populations that we are looking to reach. So please check those off. I think it's required. Again, this will help us to see the amount or the volume of needs that's out there of populations that we are not capturing in our data. So we know a lot of agencies are working with these populations already and have those documents, but a lot that are not focused on that, but they do kind of go into your program, and so we want to identify those as well. I believe that completes this webinar.
We have a few contact names here for you. You have are familiar with Juan and myself. We have another name we'd like you to add to your list. Christine Rowland is the person who oversees our financial area. So with regard to vouchering and payments, if there's any budget-related questions, Christine has spoken to some of you already, but she would be happy to see if she can address your questions. And speaking of questions, we would like to respond to a few questions that have been sitting in the queue. So we're going to, take them one at a time.
Yeah. So the first one I see Is ECM replacing the monthly reports, the Excel sheets? ECM will eventually replace the reports when we can get good data that's in there and agencies are comfortable with it. But when the agencies are comfortable and we can get a good comparison of the two, it replace ECM altogether. So that's our goal, but we can't replace it until we can really verify that data accurately.
There's also a question about can an existing agency sit in on the training for ECM? Yes, there's certainly going to be need for refresher and some new features, so the answer is yes.
So which month will we be expected to report just in ECM? So to Juan's point, we're going to review the first month or two of data to ensure that we are collecting everything that we need, and then hopefully we will roll off. But as soon as we're able to start making those comparisons, we want to ensure that everyone is submitting their documents into ECM. And once we are certain that everyone is entering their information in and we are able to run the appropriate reports, we will definitely transition away from the Excel sheets. Trust me, we do not want agencies to have to do dual reporting. We know that it is a pain, but for us, it's important that we have good data. And so we will try to transition you all off of Excel because it's easier for you all, it's easier for our team here, and just we need one repository for the data. So we will let you know as soon as possible.
Yeah, but the months are, if it's a current delegate that's asking that, I mean, we're looking for January to current and moving forward.
So will the transmittal form be changed to include targeted population for billing?
Well, yes, the transmittal form that is in this presentation does include boxes for the target population, but we're going to once again revise that particular form to include a way for you to tell us which target pop they fall under.
Yeah, and so also, and again, we wanted to make sure that we did this presentation so that you can submit your budget. And we know that we covered a lot in this presentation. We could have really just covered the budget. And so therefore, trust us, we will get to all of your questions, even if we need to come back and do a second follow-up webinar. But again, we wanted to make sure and focus on getting your information in for your 2019 budget. Second question.
No, I was just going to say too, so most of the questions really will be directed towards your individual program liaison, and that's a part of the negotiation process that happens. So you can, Alan and I definitely can answer those questions individually. Yeah, so just to note that. Mm-hmm. So we won't go over everything here because a lot of it will be handled individually between your program liaison, between Alan Klasick and Juan Cruz.
So to clarify, even if we work with 100% of enrollment as a priority population, there is a cap at 75% for the payment. Yes, that is correct. Again, we know agencies are working with this population. However, we have not previously documented or collected data on it, and so that's why we are revising it so that we will have a mechanism to show forth that this is a target population that we are working with. And again, this is year one, so we will continue to roll this out over the year. We will review, we've launched it, we will analyze it, and then we will optimize.
There was a question about will we be able to resubmit our plan now that we have the new budget form, and the answer, of course, is yes, you can revise your work plan. As I stated much earlier, that particular budget form was not available when many of you came in for your roundtable meeting.
So that was a question from Roger. How come target population is not a metric on the work program? Again, we are capturing this information in this location because, again, we just want to make sure that you are targeting the residents that are hardest to serve, had the highest barriers, and so this was just a decision that we decided upon to capture it here. Will delegate agencies still be required to do monthly reports? Yes. Does it matter if we had extra deliverables like job fairs? Will you be tracking that? If you have extra deliverables, I think that is good to know and for you to track. It's good for us to take note of it, but it will not be.
I'm wondering if on the work program chart, if there were two fields that were blank and it was fillable and you were able to add other activities such as job fairs. So check on that. I believe there were additional fields that you could add some additional activities. So yes, if it's not there, then maybe you can write it in. But I think there were fields that were added to give you an opportunity for fillable information.
Should it equal our contract amount or should it equal our total cost is greater than the contract amount? Equal contract amount.
Yeah.
Question. Should Form 3 equal our contract amount or should it equal our total cost is greater than the contract amount?
So Form 3 should equal your contract amount. Yeah, it should equal your contract amount.
Well, your line item budget indicates your costs. So obviously the contracted amount should be in one area, and then there was another column regarding other. So contracted amount plus other equals total amount. So maybe that addresses the question about going over the amount.
Will enrollment and retention forms be changing to include the billing info? Will there be a new form to show the package request?
Good question. Well, the key document is the Form 3. When vouchering, we definitely want to see the transmittal that should correspond with what you are submitting. So I know what you're asking on that question, and we'll have to look at those forms once again, the placement form, the retention form, to see if there is another box that we could add or another section that will discuss target population.
Is the $500 or more range based on your remaining 3% dollar amount? Yes, that is correct. I don't see the performance budget online. So we know that we recently received this from our finance division, and we will ensure that it is updated, and it was sent out. So it was sent out to you by your program liaison. When you say Form 3, are you referring to the non-personnel budget form?
Yes.
This does not equal total funding under the non-item budget, is that correct?
Well, it should equal. I mean, there's two budgets that agencies need to submit. One is the line item budget, which talks about your costs and your staff allocations and your fringes. And then the second budget is the performance budget, which we've discussed in detail today, which is Form 1 and Form 3.
Yeah, so the performance budget is as it was before. You only had professional and technical that was on that at equal the grant amount. So the total amount is with the shares. So it won't equal the total. It will equal the grant amount that we have, city shares. So it hasn't changed. So if you had $100,000 and you added more, then the total cost, of course, would be more. But the performance budget will match the award amount minus your total cost.
It's a $500 example in target population per participant. It's for whatever that amount averages, how many participants that averages out to, right, for the 1.5%.
Right.
So it's not for every participant.
25%. So again, a lot of the details can be, again, addressed with your contract liaison, and we can go over that with you in more detail, because it's going to be different for everybody.
We're looking for a question. We had a question about where can we find the fillable work program document or chart. That is in your scope of services document. So when you went to the FSS contracts page, there's a section there called Workforce Services, kind of down the bottom of that page, near the bottom of the page. And if you clicked on Scope of Services for Employment Preparation and Placement, it would be roughly page 8, maybe. It's in there. It's the fillable chart, which has where you would enter your quarterly projections, and if your form is working nicely, it will auto-calculate all 4 quarters into the total column. So it's there.
So the next question, on the voucher transmittal form, how do we identify which individual that is listed as either returning citizen, homeless, limited English, or do we just group them all together, and will there be a section added to ECM? So I don't know when this question was asked, but yes, on your transmittal form, Alan did mention that we're going to streamline that form. So for each client, there will be a code regarding if it's RC, a returning citizen, English, or homeless. There will be a code that you can complete next to each person. And then the second part of that is, yes, there will also be a box in ECM where you will be able to identify that person as being a part of your target population.
We have a question about the voucher transmittal form, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly what this means. The person is asking, can we simply create a column that is numbered on the left side of the column named client name? It sounds like if it's numbered, like number 1, then that maybe would correspond to the target population. But we are revising that form.
We'll take a look and see, and if you all have any recommendations, we're definitely open to making this process, again, easier for you. We do not want it to be overwhelming or a burden, or we don't want to create any new barriers. So we want to make sure it's streamlined, and we want to make sure that it's easy to complete. Next question, can these forms be hand-filled? So this is your voucher form, I believe that they're talking about. So can that be?
Well, if it's the transmittal form that they're referring to, yes, they can handwrite the name of the person and check off the box. So yes, many agencies have done that in the past, so that's fine.
That's up to you. When will we expect the new forms and the new manual? That will be coming soon in the first quarter. Will we need to redo the scope of services to include the target population and 90-day retention?
If you are you referring in this question? I'm wondering if you're referring to on the budget forms, because yes, you will need to. Well, the budget is separate from the scope of services, but we didn't review all the scope of services yet. We received about 50 of them on Monday, so we will review those. If you addressed who you are reaching out to, hopefully you have indicated you're touching the target population. If you feel like you want to amend what you submitted, we're okay with that. You can certainly send that in to Juan or myself, and in your email you could say, we have revised the narrative for our scope of services or our description. So we're okay with that. That's fine.
So just so that you know, going forward, all of the work that we're doing, we are trying to ensure that we are working with this target population. So it should be reflected in your scope, And going forward, those are points that we will be highlighting and emphasizing, because we want to ensure that the dollars that the city of Chicago expends are going towards this target population.
There's a question regarding a $50,000 award. If we do calculations based on the given rates, some of our head counts could be infractions. Do we round them up or down to the next integer? Well, of course, we want you to round them. If you round up, that will affect your unit cost for that number of clients. If you round down, it will also affect your unit cost because you'll have a different amount. So instead of having 21, if you round 21.5, if you round up to 22, that's acceptable. We hope you can meet that benchmark. If you round down to 21, we would certainly like you to meet that benchmark also. But those are some of the areas that Juan and I will look at and discuss with you on a case-by-case basis. Oh, sure. We can send out the monthly reporting Excel document, the one that we have right now. That is the template. It says 2018, but we will revise that to indicate 2019. And that is the document that Juan was referring to and Joel was referring to, that we would like you to continue using that. And if you're a new agency, we'll certainly give you some technical assistance in how to complete that. But it is a monthly spreadsheet which indicates what do you propose to do and what did you achieve in a particular month. So we'll certainly, and there's several other tabs that we're going to be looking for, such as placement information and demographics and income levels. So it's about an 8 or 9 tab document, but the first tab is the actual indication of your performance metrics.
So can we create our own self-attestation form for at-risk homeless, e.g. couch surfing? Yes, you can create your own form, and then if you have questions regarding that eligibility, we can follow up with you on that as well.
Yeah, the monthly report is due by the 5th of each month. Yeah, it's due by the 5th of each month.
So during the monitoring visit, they will review everything, and so no, you're not deemed as not performing well if you don't meet the extra deliverables. Again, they will be paying attention to that. They will be tracking that, and in terms of the monitoring group, they will not make that decision if you're not performing well. They will just document if you're tracking that information. And then as a programmatic team, we'll have those discussions with you about your deliverables as well.
Let me just add about the deliverables. The thought just occurred to me. You don't have to hit each one of those categories. Maybe your agency focuses on the homeless population. Okay, that's fantastic. Then that's your target pop. You don't have to reach out to ex-offenders or returning citizens or folks that their English is limited proficiency. So I don't know if there was any confusion with regard to that. If you touch all 3 of those categories, well, that's fine, but you are not required to hit all 3 of them.
So this is a very long question, and it's coming from Robin. Someone is a recent released incarcerated adult with a rap sheet, but is exonerated now as not a rap sheet. Oh, okay. So I'm not going to try to read through all of this, but basically, as it relates to any of these points, again, we do not want to make it troublesome or a barrier. If your person has had some involvement with the justice system and you have a question, reach out to us and we will then help you determine how to document that eligibility. We understand that someone may have just recently been released from jail or prison, or this may have occurred 10 years ago, but they've still had challenges with employment. On that form, we'll see if someone has had an arrest record and that's preventing them from getting employment, or it's a barrier for them to get employment. Utilize that first document that we have as a sample and then say that this person has had some arrests. You're the case manager, so you are working with your agency and you're working to help verify that this person has had some involvement with the justice system. And so therefore, we're not going to get into the weeds as it relates to this, but it's a very thorough example. And if you have any questions, reach out to Juan or Alan, and we'll help you be able to document that. Again, we don't want this to be laborious or make you jump through hoops. We just want to ensure that the money that we are putting out in the community is going towards those target populations and meeting the people who are in most need. I have a question about these requirements, in particular referrals. We don't refer out, which was a finding for us this year. How do we address this? So, Maribeth, I don't know if I spoke to you about that this year, but if you are a large organization and you have multiple divisions within your organization, so you may have an employment division, and then you may also have a housing division. You should create some documentation for your agency that demonstrates how you refer internally. It does not have to be an external, it doesn't have to be an external referral. For example, we are here at DFSS. We have 8 programmatic divisions. And so therefore, sometimes Juan and Alan may refer someone in need of workforce services, but they're also homeless. We may refer them to our homeless division, or we may refer them to our community services division. So therefore, it does not have to be an external referral, but you should document where you refer the person to get the services, even if it is one of your internal arms.
Yeah, hi, Brenda. We got a question about 1 day versus 30 day. 1 day is the start date of the person, and if they retain employment for 30 days, that is the reimbursable retention of 30-day employment. So yes, Brenda, that's correct.
And does the retention go in the notes?
You all are familiar with the phrase, if it's not in case notes, it didn't happen. We would love to see any type of activity recorded in case notes. So yes, please record retention.
Yeah, so we got a question about CDBG and selective service. That is a HUD requirement. So yes, selective services is required.
And there's a section on the enrollment form that addresses selective service. A couple boxes that you can choose from to check off. There's also another box that says other, and then please explain. But yes, there is a selective service requirement, as Juan said.
So I see that your question, your target population is veterans. Are there forms that have to be submitted to verify veteran status when vouchering, or just maintained in file? You can just maintain that in the file. And so therefore, if your target population is veterans, therefore, if it's a veteran that is a returning citizen, that's still the target population. If it's a homeless veteran, or if it's a veteran that has limited English proficiency, those are the target populations that we are tracking for reimbursement. So Calvin, I believe we just talked about documentation. There's a verification form in the slide deck. We have provided you with a sample that you can take and recreate. So Kevin Taylor, The team, Kevin, will be reaching out over the next month. Right now, again, our priority is to ensure that everyone gets their budgets and scopes in so that we can finalize your contract award and we can get that process going as soon as possible. So that is our priority. That is our number one priority, to get these contracts finalized. And then we'll discuss everything else as we move into the first quarter. As far as target population, returning citizens, does this include anybody who was incarcerated and or recently released individuals? Yes, that is the definition. So yes, that's exactly who we are referencing. It is important that we understand what backup documentation will be needed and reviewed by the monitors for the new payment points. Yes, we will ensure that we are meeting with our monitoring team. They will have the same samples that you all have. And if there are any questions, we will work as, again, the programmatic liaisons between you and our monitoring team to ensure that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, we answered that one.
So that would be good.
Yeah, we answered that.
Okay. Spreadsheet that we do after the 15th of the month.
Oh, don't worry about the numbers vouchered, because historically you cannot voucher. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me state the question. The question is regarding vouchering, entering data on the monthly reports for vouchering. As I said, historically, contract, it takes a couple months. I would say January, February, March. We hope contracts will be officially executed, and then we will get the word from Christine Rowland's area that you can now start to voucher. But sometimes things take a little while, but as Joel said, our top priority is getting those scopes and budgets reviewed, approved, and moved along so that everything can get officially executed.
So some individuals, due to being locked up, have not registered for selective service, but you are assisting for employment. How do you handle it? I think that can be handled in your case notes. If there was a challenge with them being able to complete that process due to incarceration, again, write it down in the case notes and then reach out to your liaison, and we will make sure that we have a process in place for you to continue to working with that individual. We understand, again, when you're working with this target population, there are barriers that prevent people from being employed, from completing their selective service. So we will take all of those issues into account and work with you to see what's the best path forward.
A question about resources for job placement. If whoever sent this question, Juan and Ellen, would be happy to share. Kevin, we would be happy to share leads and information about collaboratives and organizations that will provide job resources, job leads. CJC.net is one of them. Forefront.org is another. There are numerous resources available. So shoot Juan or myself an email and just say, can you please assist with job placement resources? Be happy to help you in that area.
I would say yes. The question is, will we need to review the scope of services to include the target population and 90-day retention information? If you can include that in your scope of services, I would say that would be good.
Yeah. Okay, so we're winding down to the last few questions. we want to wrap this up shortly. We know your time is very valuable. We appreciate the time you spent with us. If we didn't answer your question during the course of the presentation, or we somehow skipped over it, quickly type it in once again, and we'll see if we can address it before we close.
So, Kevin, it sounds like you may have some questions regarding the contract that you were just awarded. So reach out to your liaison, and then we'll be able to provide you with some additional information.
Yeah, that's perfect. We'll be able to help you on a one-on-one basis. Don't worry, Kevin.
Other than ESL class, the TABE test, what form of documentation can we use to verify limited English proficiency? So again, this is where we say there'll be an example of a self-certification or an individual attestation. Because again, if you're working with that individual and you know that they have challenges with English or being proficient with English, you can, again, within your department, utilizing the examples that we have, you can create an affidavit where you will utilize that to certify that this person has a challenge with English as a second language.
We have a question about tracking 180-day employment verification. The question is, should we continue to submit pay stubs for 180 days or just track 180-day placement? Well, you're not required to submit pay stubs to us for 180 days. As a matter of fact, that's not one of the payment points at this stage of the game. But in order for you to verify that an individual met 180 days, that's fantastic. If you can, if that individual cooperates with you and presents a pay stub to you, yes, please put a copy in their file. That would be excellent information. We're reviewing a lot of the questions that were keyed in earlier in the presentation. We hope we've answered them. If we missed something along the way, can you send an email to Juan or myself, or both of us? You've got our contact information, and we'll be happy to address that for you. So we're just going to give just a few more moments to see if there's any last-minute questions, and then we're going to shortly sign off. All right, fantastic. Well, there are no further questions that we're going to address at this time. We will address them if there's anything else that comes to mind. The PowerPoint slides are available. We can certainly send you the link to get that, or the attachment. The link for the webinar to be reviewed at another time, we'll also provide that for you. If there's any other information that we feel we would like to share with you, we'll get that to you. As a matter of fact, Juan and I will be continuing to stay in touch with you throughout the course of the year with regard to activities, events, requirements, meetings, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll be your point of contact.
So someone asked a final question, when are the budgets due? We know that the budgets are due as soon as you can get them in. But reach out to us if you're having any challenges, and we will follow up. But please work on those now to get them in as soon as possible. Your budget and your scope determine when we will be able to finalize your contract. And so the last question, to whom should budget be submitted? Again, that should go to our finance department, or no, bring it to Juan. To submit your budgets to Juan and Alan.
And then we'll forward it on to
We'll
finance
forward it on.
after we review it.
Most of our clients will, with low English and basic skills deficient, is that sufficient? So, I mean, yeah, that's what we're saying. We know that this is the population that you work with currently. The only difference is this year we're going to track it. And so, therefore, make sure that you are tracking this information, and you should not have any challenges meeting that 1.5%.
Okay, I think that was the last question. We would like to wrap this up. So on behalf of me, I want to thank you. I wish everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to all, and safe travels for everybody who is traveling to visit family and friends. Juan just gave me the high sign, Go Bears. We're big Bears fans here. Any last comments, Joel?
No, thank you all. And again, we appreciate you all jumping on this webinar. Again, as we move forward into this year, we don't, just keep this in mind, we don't want this to be a hurdle for you or a barrier for you. If you have any questions, reach out to us. We will work with you to ensure that you are submitting the appropriate documentation so that you can maximize your contract. So thank you all so much. Happy holidays, and we will be in touch soon.